Hi, welcome to Jen's Movies of the Week, episode 2. Hey everyone, I'm Jennifer Howell. I run the Every Rom-Com podcast. That is my official podcast that I edit very carefully and research very carefully. This is my second podcast. I just wanted a place to talk about movies that interest me during the week that I probably won't talk about on the podcast. So if you watched episode 1, welcome back. If you didn't, I talked about some of the best and worst movies I saw last week. This week, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm just going to talk about some notable movies that I enjoyed this week. I did see a couple that I wasn't so sure on, but one of them deserves their own episode, and one of them I just don't feel like mentioning. You might notice my background if you watched episode 1. Each week, I've decided I'm going to add one more movie picture to the backdrop. So if you watched last week, you can try to figure out what's the difference. A lot of these pictures are things I took out of magazines in high school and college and actually had on my wall at that time. So I've hoarded some of this stuff for a while. Um, Other than that, it's been a really weird week for me because I'm living in Wisconsin and we've had the wildfire smoke from Canada kind of like in our area. And unfortunately, it was such high levels that sometimes that it got into our house and our air filters weren't even dealing with it. So it's been a little rough. Yeah, but my heart obviously goes out more to the people who are actually in the fires and fighting the fires. And yeah, I just can't even imagine. And I hope everyone stays as safe as possible. If you are affected by the wildfire smoke, I urge you to not go outside when the air levels are, especially in the red and higher, but like wear an N95 mask if you have to go outside. It's very important. The health effects can be very detrimental to you. And if you don't have an air filter in your house, either get, if you can afford it, get a regular air filter. If you have a little less money, you should get a box fan and attach a MERV 13 filter to the box. It really does make a huge difference, okay? And it's kind of a cheaper way to jerry rig that. I'll try to put a link to something in the notes on YouTube to help you figure out how to do that. Or a Corsi Rosenthal box is even better if you can do that. All right, that was my public service announcement. I swear I'm going to talk about movies now. Okay, so yeah, this week I watched some movies that I really liked. I would rate each of them a 4 or above on Letterboxd. My Letterboxd is Jen Every Romcom if you want to follow me over there. And I do rate and review every single thing I watch. So here, let's get started. So the first thing I want to talk about is The China Syndrome from 1979. And this movie is directed by James Bridges. He is the director of a movie we're going to cover on every rom-com, a considerably less critically acclaimed movie. I'm not going to say which one yet, but that's why I ended up watching the movie. And I am going to talk about this movie in more depth in my double feature recommendations, but I just want to shout it out briefly. It stars Jack Lemmon, Jane Fonda, and Michael Douglas. It is one of those kind of 70s paranoia conspiracy movies, but it's also a journalism movie. The actors are all giving fantastic performances here. This is not my research podcast, so I'm going to say I believe that Jack Lemmon won an Oscar for this. I know it was nominated for several Oscars, this movie, and I believe it also won Best Screenplay. And when I sort of heard about this movie, it wasn't one that anyone was really talking about. So I thought, oh, maybe it's just one of those 70s movies that people liked it then, but it won't hold up. No, it absolutely holds up. And the last part of it is very suspenseful. So you got to check this out. All right, and now I probably did talk about it the way I'm going to on my episode, but I'll try to put something different in there. All right, second movie I want to talk about is a very critically acclaimed movie, Witness for the Prosecution from 1957, directed by Billy Wilder. Now, if you're not familiar with Billy Wilder, he is somebody you should definitely check out his filmography. Sunset Boulevard, Double Indemnity, Some Like It Hot. He is one of America's premier directors. And I've been trying to sort of slowly work my way through everything he directed. And a lot of things that he wrote before he directed, too, are really fantastic. Like he contributed to the script for Ninotchka, directed by Ernst Lubitsch, and among other things. So Witness for the Prosecution, it's a little different than some of his stories. I believe it's based on an Agatha Christie novel, but he definitely adds his own flourishes into the story. If you watch the special features on the DVD, we got the DVD from the library. It had a lot of interesting insight into how the story was developed. And it has an amazing cast. Charles Laughton is fantastic. Marlene Dietrich, she has become very near and dear to my heart after I've watched a ton of her work. Tyrone Power, Elsa Lanchester, who's the Bride of Frankenstein, but she did a lot of really great kind of comic roles later in her life. And Una O'Connor, wonderful character actress. This movie, like, I think until the last bit, I was, I thought, oh, this is good, but I'm not sure why it has such a high rating on Letterboxd. And then you get to the end and some stuff happens. I'm not going to even hint at what it is, but stuff happens to the narrative that takes it up a level or two. So definitely go into that as unspoiled as you can. And yeah, Billy Wilder, I recommend all his movies. If you want to be a true cinephile, you got to know your Billy Wilder movies. All right. Next movie I'm going to talk about is Mr. Nobody Against Putin. And this is from last year. And you may know that it won the Oscar for Best Documentary Feature. Now, this I was surprised on Letterboxd. A lot of people are kind of very so on this. I kind of went in before I looked at all the reviews and everything, and I was impressed by it. Like, I didn't watch the other documentary feature nominees, so maybe that's where some of the friction is coming from. But it was a really sort of, to me, moving and personal portrait of what it's like for one man to live in Russia and to try to stand up against authority there, maybe even in small ways. But like, it's hard. Like, it's one thing to know that Russia is an authoritarian state, and it's another thing to like see this man's depictions. Like, he's a camera operator at this school, to see the propaganda in process, to see the pressure in progress to conform, and the fear on people's faces, even if it's really subtle. It was chilling, honestly. Like, and you feel like the United States is maybe just like a little bit behind that, and we could be pushed over if we're not careful. I definitely think that there's some people in our current government who would be happy if we were more like Russia. So I think it's very important that every American watch this movie, Mr. Nobody Against Putin, and consider, is that the kind of society we want to live in? Where propaganda is being fed to kids in school, where people are afraid to, dissent from the government, where like the leader of the government becomes almost like a religion. Like, it's not something I want. I know that much. Um, but yeah, it reminded me a little bit of Michael Moore's early work too, like to the point where like the narrator, the guy who's the subject of the documentary, he's describing his like really crappy hometown, but he loves it. It reminded me of Michael Moore's relationship with Flint in Roger and Me. And another excellent movie you should see, by the way, Roger and Me. It's very different from Michael Moore's later documentaries in some ways. So if you've never seen that, also check that out. I think it would actually make a great double feature with Mr. Nobody Against Putin. So yeah, definitely, I try to see movies that win the Oscar, and this one definitely paid off. All right. And then my last movie, I added something to my summer movies list, okay? And this is a little bit out there. This recommendation is not going to work for everybody. It's called Stranger by the Lake from 2013. It is a French film. And basically the topic is, there's a gay man and he goes to this cruising area by a lake, and a violent incident occurs at the lake, making it kind of a dangerous place for him to be. But he continues to court danger. And I'm not going to spoil how he continues to court danger, but it is quite something. Like, it's one of those movies where you're like, really? You're doing that? I mean, but for some reason it worked. I think part of it reason it worked is because it's very beautifully shot. The environment is so well rendered. You feel kind of the sensation of being there. Like, another reason it works, I think, is the performances are really good. And then finally, I think it works because it's not just a movie that's about the narrative on the surface. I think it really is about thematic elements. Like, there's a lot of ways you could interpret this movie about the way we as human beings court danger, especially when we're in search of pleasure or love. Definitely, there's a lot of queer readings that have been done of this film, which I suggest you look into if you actually watch the film. Now, one thing I will say, if you do not like explicit sexuality in your films, this is not the movie for you. Okay. There's definitely, I would say, unsimulated sex acts in this movie. I mean, if it wasn't simulated, they had some really good CGI, but I'm pretty sure it was unsimulated sex acts in the movie. So yeah, Watch if that's something you're okay with. And if you're not, like, skip it maybe. But I I think honestly, I'm not one of those people who's like, we don't need sex in films. I'm like one of those people who's like, we probably do need a little more sex in films, like that are made for grown-ups, because it's part of our lives. And it's one of the areas that is like less covered in a realistic way, in a complex way. Whenever there's a film that covers sexuality in complex ways, in interesting ways, that isn't just about titillation, that isn't, just some kind of like pornographic movie or like softcore pornographic movie, I'm really grateful. Like, I think it's something that needs to be taken seriously and explored. And it's a rich thematic element too. So yeah, I come down on the side of sex in movies can be very good. Okay. And this movie is definitely an exemplar of that. Now, it's a dark movie as well. So, you know, I was a little sad to add it to my summer movies list because it already has a lot of horror and dark movies, and this is definitely a thriller bordering on a horror. But I'm really glad I saw it. It's definitely going to be something I want to rewatch in the future because I think I can get more from a second viewing. All right. And yeah, I'm probably going to end it for like this for today because my throat is a little scratchy from the smoke that's gotten into our house. And next week, maybe I'll cover some more movies I really liked. Maybe I'll throw in some movies that I didn't like as much. Let me know in the comments if you prefer that I tell you some of the bad movies I watched this week too, because I did watch a few, but I'm keeping it from you this time. All right. And I'm going to sign off. I'm just going to let you remind you to subscribe to our channel if you want to be notified when a new video comes up. And also subscribe to Every Romcom podcast over here on YouTube. I'm really ashamed of myself now that I have more subscribers on this, my second informal podcast, than I have on my official podcast, which I put hours and hours of research and editing into each week. Okay, it takes like 18 hours minimum to produce an episode of Every Romcom. So love has gone into that show. Care has gone into that show. So subscribe to both if you can, and find us wherever you get your podcasts, also at Every Romcom. This one just on video. All right, everybody, stay safe out there, and hope you are not in the wildfire smoke area or the wildfire area. And if you are, my heart is with you. All right, goodbye.